Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're doing well. This is another read aloud. We have 2 chapters left of the City of Ember, so I'm going to read both chapters and then we'll finish City of Ember. And then in our next read aloud, we will be reading this one, The People of Sparks. And you will not have this, obviously, but you can just listen. And then you'll be able to take an ARP test on it as well. I encourage, if your parents allow you to, I encourage you to watch the video. If we were in class, we would have watched the video after we finished it. So, take your book out, turn to chapter 19, which is page 250, A World of Light. As they squeezed past the rocks at the entrance to the path, Dune thought he saw the candlelight glance off a shiny place on the wall. He stopped to look, and when he saw what it was, he called out to Lena, who was a few steps ahead of him. "There's a notice." It was a framed sign bolted to the stone, a printed sheet behind a piece of glass. Dampness had seeped under the glass and made splotches on the paper, but by holding their candles up close, they could read it. "Welcome, refugees from Ember. This is the final stage of your journey. Be prepared for a climb that will take several hours. Fill your bottles with water from the river. We wish you good fortune, the builders." "They're expecting us," said Lena. "Well, they wrote this a long time ago," Dune said. "The people who put it here must all be dead by now." "That's true, but they wished us good fortune. It made me feel as if they're watching over us." "Yes, and maybe their great-great-great-grandchildren will be there to welcome us." Encouraged, they started up the path. Their candles made only a feeble glow, but they could tell that the path was quite wide. The ceiling was high over their heads. The path seemed to have been made for a great company of people. In some places, the ground beneath their feet was rutted in parallel grooves, as if a wheeled cart of some kind had been driven over it. After they had walked a while, they realized that they were moving in long zigzags. The path would go in one direction for some time, and then turn sharply and go the opposite way. As they went along, they talked less and less. The path sloped relentlessly upward, and they needed their breath just for breathing. The only sound was the light pat-pat of their footsteps. Lena and Dune took turns carrying Poppy on their backs, and she had gotten tired of walking very soon and cried to be picked up. Twice they stopped and sat down to rest, leaning against the walls of the passage and taking drinks from Dune's bottle of water. "How many hours do you think we've been walking?" Lena asked. "I don't know," Dune said. "Maybe 2, maybe 3. We must be nearly there." They climbed on and on. Their first candles had long ago burned down to the last inch, as had their second candles. Finally, when their third ones were about halfway gone, Lena began to notice that the air smelled different. The cold, sharp rock smell of the tunnel was changing to something softer, a strange, lovely smell. As they rounded a corner, a gust of this soft air swept past them, and their candles went out. Dune said, "I'll find a match," but Lena said, "No, wait, look." They were not in complete darkness. A faint haze of light shone in the passage ahead of them. "It's the lights of the city," breathed Lena. Lena set Poppy down. "Quick, Poppy," she said, and Poppy began to trot, keeping close at Lena's heels. The strange, lovely smell in the air grew stronger. The passage came to an end a few yards farther along, and before them was an opening like a great empty doorway. Without a word, Lena and Dune took hold of each other's hands, and Lena took hold of Poppy's. When they stood in the doorway and looked out, they saw no new city at all, but something infinitely stranger, a land vast and spacious beyond any of their dreams. Filled with air, they seemed to move and lit by a shining silver circle hanging in an immense black sky. In front of their feet, the ground swept away in a long, gentle slope. It was not bare stone as in Ember. Something soft covered it, like silvery hair, as high as their knees. Down the slope was a tumble of dark, rounded shapes, and then another slope rose beyond that. Way off into the distance, as far as they could see, the land lay in rolling swells with clumps of shadow in the low places between them. "Dune," cried Lena, "more light." She pointed at the sky. He looked up and saw them, hundreds and hundreds of tiny flecks of light, strewn like spilled salt across the blackness. "Oh," he whispered. There was nothing else to say. The beauty of these lights made his breath stop in his throat. They took a few steps forward. Dune bent to feel the strands that grew out of the ground, almost higher than Poppy's head. They were cool and smooth and soft, and was dampness on them. Breathe, said Lena. She opened her mouth and took in a long breath of air. Dune did the same. It's sweet, he said, so full of smells. They held their hands out to feel the long stems as they waded slowly through them. The air moved against their faces and in their hair. Hear those sounds, said Dune. A high, thin, chirping sound came from somewhere nearby. It was repeated over and over like a question. Yes, said Lena. What could it be? Something alive, I think. Maybe some kind of bug. A bug that stings, Lena turned to Dune. Her face was shadowy in the silver light. It's so strange here, Dune, and so huge, but I'm not afraid. No, I'm not either. It feels like a dream. A dream, yes. Maybe that's why it feels familiar. I might have dreamed about this place. They walked until they came to where the dark shapes billowed up from the ground. These were plants they discovered, taller than they were, with stems as hard and thick as the walls of houses, and leaves that spread out over their heads. On the slope beside these plants, they sat down. Do you think there is a city here somewhere, Helena asked, or any people at all? I don't see any lights, Dune said, even far off. But with this silver lamp in the sky, maybe they don't need lights. Dune shook his head doubtfully. People would need more light than this, he said. How could you see well enough to work? How could you grow your food? It's a beautiful light, but not bright enough to live by. Then what shall we do? If there's no city and no people? I don't know. Dune didn't feel like thinking. He was tired of figuring things out. He wanted to look at this new world and take in the scent of it and the feel of it and figure things out later. Lena felt the same way. She stopped asking questions, drew Poppy onto her lap, and gazed in silence at the glimmering landscape. After a while, she became aware that something strange was happening. Surely when she had first sat down, the silver circle was just above the highest branch of the tall plant. Now the branch cut across it, as she watched the circle sink very slowly down until it was hidden, except for a gleam of brightness behind the leaves. It's moving, she said to Dune. Yes, a little later, it seemed to her that her eyes were blurring. There was a fuzziness in the sky, especially around the edges. It took a while for her to realize what was making the fuzziness. Light, she said. I see it, said Dune. It's getting brighter. The edge of the sky turned gray, and then pale orange, and then deep fiery crimson. The land stood out against it, a long black rolling line. One spot along this line grew so bright they could hardly look at it. So bright it seemed to have a bite out of the land. It rose higher and higher until they could see that it was a fiery circle, first deep orange and then yellow, and too bright to look at any longer. The color seeped out of the sky and washed over the land. Light sparkled on the soft hair of the hills and shone through the lacy leaves as every shade of gray sprang to life around them. They lifted their faces to the astonishing warmth. The sky arched over them, higher than they could have imagined, a pale, clear blue. Lena felt as though a lid that had been on her all her life had been lifted off. Light and air rushed through her, making a song like the songs of Ember. Only it was a song of joy. She looked at Dune and saw that he was smiling and crying at the same time. And she realized that she was too. Everything around them was springing to life. A glorious racket from the branches, tweedling notes, peeps, birdless, high, sharp calls. Bugs wandered Dune, imagining with awe the bugs that could make such sounds. But then he saw something fly across a cluster of leaves and swoop down low across the ground, making a clear, sweet call as it flew. Did you see that? He said to Lena, pointing. And there's another one. And there, repeated Poppy, leaping from Lena's lap and whirling around, pointing in every direction. The air was full of them now. They were much too large to be insects. One of them lit nearby on a stem. It looked at them with two bright black eyes, and opening its mouth, which was pointed like a thorn, sent forth a little trill. It's speaking to us, said Duke. What could it be? Lena just shook her head. The little creature shifted its claw-like feet on the stem, flapped its brown wings, and trilled again. Then it leaped into the air and was gone. They leapt up, too, and threw themselves into exploration. The ground was alive with insects, so many that Dune just laughed in helpless wonder. Flowers bloomed among the green blades, and a stream ran at the foot of the hill. They roamed over the green-coated slopes, running, sliding, calling out to each other with each new discovery, until they were exhausted. Then they sat down by the entrance to the path to eat what was left of their food. They untied June's bundle, and Lena suddenly cried out, "The book! We forgot about the book!" There it was, wrapped in its blotched green cloth. "Let's read it out loud while we eat," said June. Lena opened the fragile notebook and laid it on the ground in front of her. She picked up a carrot with one hand, and with the other she kept her place on the scribbled page. This is what she read. You guys, we're on chapter 20. We finally made it to the end of the book. It's amazing. We finally did it. Okay, I hope that you have been reading along, or if you've been reading on your own, great. I hope you've finished the book by now. If not, don't forget, you can take an ARP test on it. The last message, chapter 20. Friday, they tell us we leave tonight. I knew it would be soon. The training has been over for nearly a month now, but still it feels sudden. It feels like a shock. Why did I agree to do this? I am an old woman too tired to take up a new life. I wish now that I had said no when they asked me. I have put everything I can into my one suitcase. Clothes, shoes, a good wind-up clock, some soap, an extra pair of glasses. Bring no books, they said, and no photographs. We have been told to say nothing ever again about the world we came from, but I am going to take this notebook anyhow. I am determined to write down what happens. Some day, someone may need to know. Ooh, what's going to happen, guys? Saturday. I went to the train station yesterday evening as they told me to, and got on the train they told me to take. It took us through Spring Valley, and I gazed out the window at the fields and houses of the place I was saying goodbye to, my home and my family's home for generations. I rode for 2 hours until the train reached a station in the hills. When I arrived, they met me, 3 men in suits, and drove me to a large building, where they led me down a corridor and into a big room full of other people, all with suitcases, most with gray or white hair. Here we have been waiting now for more than an hour. They have spent years and years making this plan. It's supposed to ensure that no matter what happens, people won't disappear from the earth. Some say that will never happen anyhow. I'm not so sure. Disaster seems very close. Everything will be all right. They will tell us, but only a few people believe them. Why, if it's going to be all right, do we see it getting worse every day? And of course, this plan is proof that they think the world is doomed. All the best scientists and engineers have been pulled into work on it. Extraordinary efforts have been made. Efforts that would have done more good elsewhere. I think it's the wrong answer, but they asked me if I would go. I suppose because I've spent my life on a farm and I know about growing food. In spite of my doubts, I said yes. I'm not sure why. There are 100 of us, 50 men and 50 women. We are all at least 60 years old. There will be 100 babies too. 2 babies for each pair of parents. I don't know yet which one of these gentlemen I'll be matched with. We are all strangers to one another. They planned it that way. They said there would be fewer memories between us. They want us to forget everything about the lives we've led and the places we've lived. The babies must grow up without no knowledge of a world outside, so that they feel no sorrow for what they have lost. I hear some noises across the room. I think it's the babies arriving. Yes, here they come, each being carried by one of those gray-suited men. So many of them, so small. Little scrunched-up faces, tiny fists waving. I must stop for now. They're going to pass them out. Later, we're traveling to get on a bus this time. It is night, I think, though it's hard to be sure because they have boarded up the windows of the bus from the outside. They don't want us to know where we're going. I have a baby on my lap, a girl. She has a bright pink face and no hair at all. Stanley, who sits next to me, holds a baby boy with brown skin and a few tufts of black hair. Stanley and I are the keepers of these children. Our task is to raise them in this new place we're going to. By the time they are 20 or so, we'll be gone. They'll be on their own, making a new world. Stanley and I have named these children Star and Forest. Sunday, the buses have stopped, but they have not allowed us to get out yet. I can hear crickets singing and smell the grass, so we must be in the country, and it must be night. I am very tired. What kind of place can this be, safe from earthly catastrophes? All I can guess is that it must be underground. The thoughts fills me with dread. I'll try to sleep a little now. Later, there was no chance to sleep. They called us off the buses, and we stepped out into a landscape of rolling hills in full moonlight. That's the way we'll be going in, they told us, pointing to a dark opening in the hill we stood on. Form a line there, please. We did so. It was very quiet except for the squalling of a few of the babies. If the others were like me, they were saying goodbye to the world. I reached down to touch the grass and breathed deeply to smell the earth. My eyes swept over the silver hills, and I thought of the animals prowling softly in the shadows or sleeping in their burrows, and the birds standing beneath the leaves of the trees, with their heads tucked under the wings. Last, I raised my eyes to the moon, which smiled down on us from a long, cool distance away. The moon will still be here when they come out, I thought. The moon in the hills, at least. The opening led us into a winding passage that ran steeply downhill for perhaps a mile. It was hard going for me. My legs are not strong anymore. We moved very slowly. The last part was the worst, a rocky slope where it was easy to miss your footing and slip. This led down to a pool. By the shore of the pool, our group of aged pioneers gathered. Motor boats were waiting here for us, equipped with lanterns. When it's time for people to leave this place, is this the way they will come? I asked our pilot, who had a kind face. He said yes. But how will they know there's a way out if no one tells them? I said. How will they know what to do? They're going to have instructions, said the pilot. They won't be able to get at the instructions until the time is right. But when they need them, the instructions will be there. But what if they don't find them? What if they never come out again? I think they will. People find a way through just about anything. That was all he would say. I am writing these notes until our pilot loads the boat. I hope he doesn't notice. It ends there, said Lena, looking up. He must have noticed, said June, or she was afraid he would. So she decided to hide it instead of taking it with her. She must have hoped someone would find it, just as we did, he pondered. But we might not have if it hadn't been for Poppy. No, and we wouldn't have known that we came from here. The fiery circle had moved up in the sky now, and the air was so warm that they took off their coats. Absently, Dune dug his finger into the ground, which was soft and crumbly. But what was the disaster that happened in this place, he said. It doesn't look ruined to me. It must have happened a long, long time ago, said Lena. I wonder if people still live here. They sat looking out over the hills, thinking of the woman who had written in the notebook. What had her city been like? Lena wondered. Like Ember in some way, she imagined, a city with trouble where people argued over solutions. A dying city, but it was hard to picture a city like Ember here in this bright, beautiful place. How could anyone have allowed such a place to be harmed? But what do we do now? Asked Lena. She wrapped the notebook in its covering again and set it aside. We can't go back up the river and tell them all to come here. No, we could never make the boat go against the current. Are we here alone then forever? Maybe there's another way in, some way that lets you walk down to Ember. Or maybe there's another river that runs the other way. We have candles now. We could cross the unknown regions if we found a way to get there. This was the only plan they could come up with. So all day long they searched for another way in. Under the brow of the hill, they found a hole where a stream wandered into the dark. The water was good to drink, but the hole was far too small for them to fit through. There were gullies full of shrubs, and Lena and Dune crawled among the leaves and prickly branches but found no openings. Bugs buzzed around their ankles and past their eyes. Brown earth stained their hands, and pebbles got into their shoes. Their thick, dark, shabby clothes got all full of prickly things, and since they were much too hot anyhow, they took most of them off. They had never felt such warmth against their skin and such soft air. When the bright circle was at the top of the sky, they sat for a while in the shade of one of the tall plants on the side of the hill, and in a place where the thick branch gave way to a clearing. Poppy went to sleep, but Lena and Dune sat looking over the land. Green was everywhere, in different shades, like a huge, brilliant, gorgeous version of the overlapping carpets back in the rooms of Ember. Far away, Lena saw a narrow gray line curving like a pencil stroke across a sweep of green. She pointed this out to Dune, and both of them squinted hard at it, but it was too far away to see clearly. Could it be a road? Said Lena. It could, said Dune. Maybe there are people here after all. I hope so, said Dune. There's so much I want to know. They were still gazing at the far-off bit of gray when they heard something moving in the brush nearby. Leaves rustled. There was a scraping, shuffling sound. They stiffened and held their breath. The shuffling paused and started up again. Was it a person? Should they call out? But before they could decide what to do, a creature stepped into the clearing. It was about the same size as Poppy, only lower to the ground because it walked on 4 legs instead of 2. Its fur was a deep rust red, its face was a long triangle, and its ears stood up in points, and its black eyes shone. It trotted forward a few steps, absorbed in its own business. Behind it floated a thick, soft-looking tail. All at once it saw them and stopped. Lenia and Dune stayed absolutely still. So did the creature. Then it took a step toward them. It paused, tilted its head a little as if to get a better look, and took another step. They could see the sheen of its fur and the glint of light in its eyes. For a long moment, they stayed like this, frozen, staring at one another. Then, unhurriedly, the creature moved away. It pushed its nose among the leaves on the ground and wandering back toward the bushes. And when it raised its head again, they saw that it was holding something in its white teeth, something round and purplish. With a last glance at them, it leaped toward the bushes, its tail sailing, and disappeared. Lenia let out her breath and turned to look at Dune, whose mouth was open in astonishment. His voice shaky, he said, "That was the most wonderful thing I have ever seen, ever, in my whole life." "Yes, and it saw us," Dune said, and Lenia nodded. They both felt it. They had been seen. The creature was utterly strange, not like anything they had ever known, and yet, when it looked at them, some kind of recognition passed between them. "I know now," said Dune. "This is the world we belong in." A few minutes later, Poppy woke up and made fretful noises, and Lenia gave her the last of the peas in Dune's pack. "What was that, do you think, in the creature's mouth?" she asked. "Would it be something we could eat, a fruit of some kind?" It looked like the picture of peaches on cans, except for the color. They got up and poked around, and soon they came across a plant whose branches were laden with the purple fruits, about the size of small beets, only softer. Dune picked one and cut it open with his knife. There was a stone inside. Red juice ran out over his hands. Cautiously, he touched his tongue to it. "Sweet," he said. "If the creature can eat it, maybe we can too," said Lenia. "Shall we?" They did. Nothing had ever tasted better. Lenia cut the stones out and gave chunks of the fruit to Poppy. Juice ran down their chins. Excuse me. When they had eaten 5 or 6 apiece, they licked their sticky fingers clean and started to explore again. They went higher up the slope they were on, wading through flowers as high as their waists, and near the top they came upon a kind of dent in the ground, as if a bit of the earth had caved in. They walked down into it, and at the end of the dent they found a crack about as tall as a person, but not nearly as wide as a door. Lenia edged through it sideways and discovered a narrow tunnel. "Send Poppy through," she called back to Dune, "and come yourself." But it was dark inside, and Dune had to go back to where he'd left his pack to get a candle. By candlelight they crept along until they came to a place where the tunnel ended abruptly. But it ended not with a wall, but with a sudden huge nothingness that made them gasp and step back. A few feet beyond their shoes was a sheer, dizzying drop. They looked out into a cave so enormous that it seemed almost as big as the world outside. Far down at the bottom shone a cluster of lights. "It's Ember," Lenia whispered. They could see the tiny bright streets crossing each other, and the squares, little chirps of light, and the dark tops of buildings. Just beyond the edges was the immense darkness. "Oh, our city, Dune! Our city is at the bottom of a hole!" She gazed down through the gulf, and all of what she had believed about the world began to slowly break apart. "We were underground," she said. "Not just the pipeworks, everything." She could hardly make sense of what she was saying. Dune crouched on his hands and knees, looking over the edge. He squinted, trying to see minute specks that might be people. "What's happening there, I wonder? Could they hear us if we shouted?" "I don't think so. We're much too far up." "Maybe if they looked into the sky, they'd see our candle," said Lenia. "But no, I guess they wouldn't. The street lamps would be too bright." "Somehow we have to get word to them," said Dune. And that was when the idea came to Lenia. "Our message," she cried. "We could send our message." And they did. From her pocket, Lenia took the message that Dune had written, the one that was supposed to have gone to Clary, explaining everything. In small writing, they squeezed in this note at the top. "Dear people of Ember, we came down the river from the pipeworks and found the way to another place. It is green here, and very big. Light comes from the sky. You must follow the instructions in this message and come to the river. Bring food with you. Come as quickly as you can. Lenia Mayfleet and Dune Harrow." They wrapped the message in Dune's shirt and put a rock inside it, and then they stood in a row at the edge of the chasm, June in the middle, holding Poppy's hand in Lena's. Lena took aim at the heart of the city, far beneath her feet. With all her strength, she cast the message into the darkness, and they watched as it plunged down and down. Mrs. Murdo, walking even more briskly than usual to keep her spirits up, was crossing Harkin Square when something fell to the pavement just in front of her with a terrific thump. How extraordinary, she thought, bending to pick it up. It was a sort of bundle. She began to untie it. And that's the end, guys. I hope you enjoy. I hope that you are happy that you waited and that you've read this. And I hope you're ready to read the next one. So, that's it for this read aloud. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.